Good evening. I'm Councillor Carmen McGregor, and it is my pleasure to be co-host with Dr. April Redeck, General Manager of Community Human Services, for a discussion on our health. How are we doing? Changing the conversation. Tonight, the news is not all that great, but we are pleased that as we learn about our health status, we are also going to hear about what is occurring to change these trends. We welcome Dr. Dean Kralars, as he will explain how to look upstream in order to make a difference. Before we begin, let's start with our Feature Act presentation and celebrate some great work occurring in Chatham-Kent.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. My name is Chris June, and on behalf of the Chatham-Kent Community's Leaders Cabinet and the Chambers of Commerce, we're pleased to be here tonight to present the Feature Act presentations. Since the spring of 2014, the Future Act Quality of Life Recognition Program has been celebrated at these televised shows in joint partnership between the municipality, the Wallaceburg and Chatham-Kent Chambers of Commerce, and the Community Leaders Cabinet, as a way to say thank you for building a better Chatham-Kent. On screen, you'll see some other Future Act recipients who have also been recognized. As co-chair of the Chatham-Kent Community's Leaders Cabinet, I'm thrilled to say thank you to the several volunteers who've dedicated their time and resources to create tourism opportunities and to raise funds to give back to our community.
Thank you, Chris. I'm Gail Hunt, President and CEO of the Chatham-Kent Chamber of Commerce. Our chamber vision encourages progressive infrastructure, fostering of entrepreneurship and business linkages, integrating business and community wellness, and actively promoting Chatham-Kent. We appreciate that a community that works together towards a common goal and a vision provides our municipality with great rewards. Through the Feature Act recognition program, it's great to say thanks to groups who volunteer their time and their efforts and create opportunities in our community. Tonight, we want to say thank you to 3 groups who give back through hosting fishing tournaments and derbies. As I call your name, please join us up front. Representing Southwest Outdoors Club with the Big Boys Walleye and Salmon Tournament is Ken Kohler. Welcome, Ken. Representing Corporal Harry Minor VC Branch 185 Royal Canadian Legion and the Great Erie Salmon and Walleye Hunt is Ralph McCormick. Welcome, Ralph. And we have Carol Ann Belanger and Tom Beaton, who represent the Canadian Tire Mitchells Bay Open. And welcome, Carol Ann and Tom.
Hello, I'm Karen DeBerg, the chair of the Wallaceburg Chamber. I'd like to highlight each one of your contributions. Ken, I know you and the other volunteers host the Southwest Outdoors Club Big Boys Tournament. One of your club's goal is to pass on a love of the outdoors to youth. The fishing tournament has been occurring for 15 years and it is an integral part of Wheatley's annual Fish Festival activities. Chatham-Kent benefits as a tourism initiative as many businesses are frequented by anglers. In addition, you give back to the community by working with our youth through providing archery in schools. Ralph, you represent the Great Erie Salmon and Walleye Hunt with the Corporal Harry Minor VC Branch 185 Royal Canadian Legion. Your event has been going on for the past 38 years, and every dollar goes back to the community to assist veterans and the community at large. We thank you for investing in our youth, veterans, and providing equipment for the local fire department and much more. Our third group is the Mitchells Bay Association, who hosts the Canadian Tire Mitchells Bay Open. Carol Ann, I know you and your co-chair, Tom, your group has a huge tourism impact. You've been successful in promoting your events and Chatham-Kent at trade shows across Ontario and in the US. Through the tournament, You engage people of all ages and give back. Many projects have been done from your funds raised with such as wetland restoration projects and creation or enhancement of the trails. We have heard that your children's event has been successful as the tournament itself, and for this year, your group, with a groups dedicated to working with children to overcome social or physical challenge, so that this year, you're contributing to the Canadian Tire Jumpstart program and the Municipal All for Kids program. It must be so fun for the youth to be treated to a day of guided angling, a hike and adventure, interpreted lessons through the wetland restoration projects, and to take home a rod, reel, tackle box. So on behalf of all of us, I'd like to congratulate you as well.
I just want to say on behalf of the community to the groups that are being recognized tonight, thank you very much. More and more each day I see people participating and getting involved in fishing. The tournaments is one of those ways that you motivate people to be a part of something. Tom, I've seen yours program in Mitchell's Bay grow time after time, year after year. And each of the programs that are being offered see more and more people getting actively involved. It's great to see the Government of Ontario coming in with the free fishing program so that way kids can go out and get to learn. All I want to say is on behalf of the community, we're proud that you're a part of our community, and most importantly is you're not only out, I guess, marketing the tour, the fishing tournament, but you're also marketing our communities. Tom, I know friends of mine who are in the hobby industry see you out there at the shows, and I think it's such a great honor when we see our fishing industry being promoted in the communities that these outdoor shows are being held. So on behalf of Council, we want to say thank you very much for your tireless efforts that you put behind here, because I know it's not easy, but most importantly is you're bringing us, the community of Chatham-Kent, to a map that we believe we need to be on, and that is one of tourism, but also of fun and enjoying the fishing industry that the Great Lakes have to offer to us. Congratulations to all of you.
I don't know. Okay, we now begin our CK plan update. Our health, how are we doing? Changing the conversation. So to start, I want to draw your attention to an infographic that you received either when you were coming in to the room, or we have put one on all of our counselors' desks. And that really is a snapshot of all of the information that Chris will be sharing with us this evening. So it's my pleasure to introduce Chris Sherman. Chris is a program manager from Chatham-Kent Public Health. And the reason this is really important to me and to the health unit is that Chris is seen in public health circles, certainly as one of our physical literacy experts throughout the province, really. And we're very, very lucky to have him here with us in Chatham-Kent. So Chris, I will pass this over to you, and you can provide us with some information on how we're doing here locally.
Okay. Thank you and good evening. Before we get to hear from our guest speaker here tonight, I just wanted to provide some context around our local chronic disease rates and associated risk factors. To give you a bit of background, everything I'm going to go through here today is contained in the 2017 Health Status Report, which was shared at our Board of Health meeting in October of last year. And it was a recommendation of the board that this be brought forward as information to council, and it was determined that the CK Progress Report would be the best format to do that and to allow for a broader conversation on health. So how does this tie to the CK Plan? As stated in the CK Plan 2035, we're aiming for our community within one generation to be one of the healthiest and safest in Ontario. The rates of chronic disease and related risk factors, which I will go over in a moment here, speak directly to some of the indicators, more specifically overweight and obesity, avoidable death from preventable causes, and avoidable death from treatable causes. In terms of chronic disease mortality in Chatham-Kent, when compared to Ontario, the rest of the province, Chatham-Kent has a 33% higher mortality rate due to cardiovascular disease, a 14% higher rate of cancer, and a 50% higher rate of diabetes. Just to give you an overview in terms of the risk factors associated with chronic disease, and this is Canadian data from 2010. Approximately 25% of deaths could be attributed to smoking, another 25% attributed to physical inactivity, about 10% due to poor nutrition, and another 5% due to alcohol consumption. We know these risk factors amount to approximately 89.4 billion, or 22% of all Ontario's healthcare costs between 2004 and 2013, with 53% attributed to physical inactivity and 41% to smoking alone. When we combine these health risk behaviors with socioeconomic status, the total impact was 134 billion, nearly 1/3 of total healthcare costs in Ontario during the same time frame. So what are our risk factors and what do they look like here in Chatham-Kent? 28% of adults currently smoke, which is higher than the provincial average, and 32% exceed the low-risk drinking guidelines, which is significantly higher than the province. Approximately one half of residents report being physically inactive during their leisure time, and another 2/3 eat fruit and vegetables less than 5 times per day. And just for a reference, the recommendation is 8 to 10 servings a day, so that's even quite a bit less. Furthermore, 8% of Chatham-Kent households report being food insecure, meaning food quality or quantity was compromised or food intake was reduced due to income. In terms of overweight and obesity, when we look at our rates, 61% of adults, 41% of youth are either overweight or obese, which is consistently higher than the province. When we think about what can be done to improve health and reverse these trends of chronic disease, we have to consider what determines our health. And this is a nice diagram depicting all of the factors, but to put it simply, as defined by the World Health Organization, they can be categorized into 3 main areas: the social and economic environment, the physical environment, and the person's individual characteristics and behaviors. So when we think about who actually delivers health in our community, health, education, recreation, municipal government, and other sectors all play a role. The CK Plan 2035 outlines how we're going to achieve the goal of being a healthy and safe community, which speaks to many of these determinants. Through healthy public policies, by protecting community wellness, promoting quality living, and advocating for accessibility. And not to lose sight of a number of great things that are happening in our community, and these are just a few that are currently being done. A snapshot of what's being done in relation to social determinants of health, our food environment, our built environment, and of course the leadership that the municipality has demonstrated in its smoke-free policies. So, coming back again, when we think about where we want to be, based on our current health status, it is clear that we still have a lot of work to do. Our hope through this evening's session is not to provide all of the answers, but at least our hope is to start the conversation about how we as a community can help set the conditions necessary for our residents to achieve optimal health. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for that informative presentation. It is sobering news when you look at the trends that are occurring, but tonight it's about changing the conversation, and I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Dean Kraylars. Dean is an expert in physical literacy, and I understand, there he is, that he was recently in Geneva supporting World Health Organization on this topic. You can see on the screen that Dr. Kraylar is with the University of Manitoba, co-chair of the Premier's Council on Healthy Living, and works with many organizations such as Sports for Life, Cirque du Soleil, and the RCMP. Dean, welcome to Chatham-Kent, and we look forward to learning how we can look upstream and change our future health status.
Thank you very much. Your Worship and council members and members of the community, it's great to be here on creating a social innovation that creates a community of wellness. I'm going to tell you about something you may not have heard about before, physical literacy. And I'm going to speak to you both emotionally as well as intellectually today, because if it means something to you emotionally, I think we can make some steps forward a little bit faster, because we tend to not do many things. We don't want to change unless we really are incentivized. I will tell you that I looked at your economic plan for 2035, and I think the 4 items that you see before you, which were listed previously, can physical literacy impact each one of those items? I'm going to argue to you, and I've selected my slides to indicate yes. Every one of them, including culture, environmental stability, health and safety for certainty, as well as economic prosperity. So the first thing I'm going to tell you about is no surprise to you. We live in a movement-suppressed culture. And this slide is rather interesting because it tells us something that's been around for a long time. In 1885, if you look at that wondrous motor vehicle up there, it was the first motor vehicle of its kind manufactured by Carl Benz of the Mercedes-Benz Corporation. And that's a fetching vehicle with 3 wheels and a steam engine, and it would look beautiful in driving around the communities here of Chatham-Kent. At 1885, Americans and Canadians became concerned about conveniences like an auto vehicle, and they said, we need to stop these conveniences, not so much in their production, but have a balanced lifestyle, because these things, like motor vehicles, are going to make us sedentary. And lo and behold, in 1884 was the first occurrence of the word physical literacy. This is not a new term. It just didn't catch on like the concept of literacy did, that everybody should read and write. And everybody in this room knows the value of reading and writing, and Canadians value that very highly, as most economic countries in the world did. In 1947, the transistor was made, and that's shown in there was made by Bell Labs by 3 engineers in New Jersey. And that little device, there's 9 billion of them inside your phones, and multiple billions of them inside your computers. That was the generation of the computer era and electronic era. The personal computer came out in 1974. And right at that moment, a very large number of researchers, academics, educators, community leaders said, we need physical literacy once again, because that will be a threat to our lifestyle. We're all going to sit in front of computers. How prophetic that was. But in 1990, the very bottom, we didn't have the internet till about 1973, but we didn't have the World Wide Web until 1990. That's a very recent innovation. So the internet culture was only created relatively recently. And again, interestingly enough, in about the year 2000, physical literacy came on the forefront again by people in England. And they said, physical literacy, we need to constitute physical literacy at the same level as literacy, because we've not put it on the same pedestal. So this is not a new invention. It's just something that hasn't caught on. This is the data that was spoken about earlier on, and I'll show you American data. In this slide is the Americans measured in 2008 not by self-report, as Chris indicated, but directly measured physical activity. And this is going to shock you. Less than 49% of boys under the age of puberty meet the minimum criteria of 60 minutes a day of huffing and puffing activity. And interesting enough, 34% of girls don't meet the same standard. Now, as a result of physical literacy, we now understand why that difference exists between boys and girls when there should be none. We have same standards for voting, we have same physical activity standards, and same education standards. There should be no difference in physical activity between young men and women at that age especially. After puberty, there's a precipitous drop in physical activity that you can see down to an average of 7% by age 15. And then in the Americans, by the age of 20 to 59, over 96% do not meet the criteria. Why is that relevant? Because that was in 2008. Canadians measured their physical activity in Ontario in multiple manners, but using the same techniques as the Americans in 2011 to 2014. And our data has now matched that of the Americans. We are exactly 6 years behind the Americans on a train wreck, and the Swedes, who I also work with extensively, are 8 years behind Canadians. Every developed country in the world is showing this level of physical inactivity. What's relevant here is that this little diagram, even though it's a simple one with a block diagram with arrows, it takes about 30 randomized controlled trials, scientific studies, to prove each one of those arrows. And it is well demonstrated in the world because we're literate, because we have universities and can do science. We're able to show that physical inactivity is directly coupled to every one of those diseases. There's over 42 of them. You can peek at them. And what's relevant to you here is that psychological disorders like mood, depression, and anxiety disorders are directly coupled to physical inactivity. It is critical today that if Chatham-Kent is going to move forward on a health agenda, that you couple mental health with physical health. You can never uncouple them. If you have a mental health strategy, you must couple it to physical activity. If you have a physical activity strategy, it must be coupled to mental health. Doing otherwise is actually going backwards. Because if you don't control the psychology or help a person with their psychology, it negatively feeds back to all the other problems. So mind and body are one and the same and need to be treated as such at the community level in every single sector. This is obesity in every country, many countries that are what we call developed countries. And right now, obesity levels are an all-time high, and they're rising at levels that are unprecedented. You'll notice that the graph shaded in light coral or brown are actually increasing dramatically. And in Canada, in my province right next to mine, which is Saskatchewan, they went from 30% obesity rates, not overweight and obesity, straight obesity, to 45.9 in a 10-year time span. This can happen very, very rapidly, and there are now over 15 countries with 55% obesity rates, 55% obesity rates, when in 1972 there were none. So this is something that's catching on due to physical inactivity. This is data from my lab. The 7 people on top, I've taken a slice using a CT scanner through their femur, and I'm looking at their bone quality. The 7 people on top, you can easily see that their bones are very different than the 7 people that are matched to the people on top. It doesn't take a scientist to see the bones on top are thinner, have been eaten from the inside out, called endosteal resorption, and they have a different shape than the bones on bottom. Why I show you this graph is the average age of the people in this diagram are 21 years of age. The people on top, the 7 people, take 3,000 steps a day or less. The people on the bottom take 15,000 steps a day or more. They represent the polar extremes of our population. And what's relevant here, the 7 people on top, there is no medicine nor exercise that it can provide to these individuals to recover their bones. They are past the point of no return. Now, most people will have the ability to change their bones, but in the end of the day, those 7 people don't. If there's physical inactivity levels that we have, like in Canada, United States, 25% of your bone mass is grown through puberty. 25% of your bone mass. And if you recall, physical activity went from under 50% to under 10%. Osteoporosis is yet another condition that is related to physical inactivity. This is something that is tragic in our society. This is a diagram. If you look at area A, it's very large. And this young gentleman, 1919, his name was George. He was 8 years old, and at 8 years old, George could go from his house in Sheffield, England, take his fishing pole, and walk to the pond and go for a fish without an adult person being present. That was 9.7 kilometers in distance. His daughter, his son, Jack, when he was 8, was only allowed to go 1.6 kilometers in 1950. His daughter, Vicky, in 1979 was able to go 800 meters, and Vicky's son, Ed, now 8, can only walk 300 meters without supervision by an adult. Why is that relevant to you? Without exposure to the natural world, without appreciating the natural environment, and without decision-making ability of a young person being established at a young age, their ability to make decisions for themselves, the psychology of that person, it has deep ramifications. So just in a few generations, whether I show this slide in Sweden, Trinidad, United States, Canada, and I dare say here, you'd agree with that that's happened here. Why that's relevant and interesting to me, and in fun and jest, I show the next slide, but it's actually not funny. In the United States, they have definitions of what are free-range chickens. It says you have to be outside this much and chickens move that much before you call them a free-range chicken. I want to bring back free-range behavior, and maybe this community will be the first community whereby we have free-range people once again. It doesn't mean releasing our 8-year-olds into the forest. It means giving them the ability to move a little bit more in our environment without adult supervision and stopping the insanity of overprotecting our children and providing surplus safety, which harms them downstream. This is a great book. If you haven't read Richard Louv's book, he quotes Nature Deficit Disorder. His book in green is from 2008. The Vitamin N is from 2016. These two books talk about the importance of being physical in our environment with also physical literacy. These headlines are also part of this insanity of our communities where they ban cartwheels in playgrounds. And bureaucrats are fixated on preventing a terrifying condition known as childhood. And the interesting things about this, it creates bubble-wrapped kids. And I'm not talking about obesity when I show that image in the bottom corner of that slide. I'm talking about each piece of bubble wrap as a psychological injury that we impart upon children by not participating in this world. And for us, a surplus of safety is inappropriate. It has to be adequate safety. So when our risk managers in our communities create rules for transport and playgrounds, we have to be sane about how we implement them. We learn by doing. Our bodies are what they are by how they interact with the world. I'm a neuroscientist by training, and our brains change from 0 to 100 years of age, 112, and they'll disconnect connections, prune them if we don't use our brains, and they'll make connections if we do use our brains. I dare say that our children's brains are very different than they were in before. Pediatric emergency room visits by children is on an exponential rise in Canada due to childhood anxiety disorders. The best way to become a social human being is by interacting physically between one another. Data has really demonstrated this. Without social interaction at recess, without physical play, the ability of the brain to deal with anxiety reduces. But it's a simple solution. Let's play. Physical literacy, what is it? What's it about? And why is this a new concept but really old in origins? If you read this quote, this is from the United Nations, and it says, literacy, which is reading and writing in this case, is crucial by the acquisition by every child, youth, and adult, and it is an essential life skill to participate in this world. And I think everybody in this room must agree with that statement. It's kind of hard not to, but that's a belief statement, isn't it? That's a belief. I didn't have to show you science to say that's what we should do. 100 years ago, we implemented literacy in Canada. We're at 95% literacy rates. United States is around 85%, Sweden 99%. We take that very seriously, and what's relevant to that, it took 100 years to get there of concerted effort. But it has not brought us health. It has brought us good health care, but has not brought us health. So perhaps physical literacy should be on the same level playing field as literacy, and that's what your community can be engaged in. So I submit to you, if you look at that slide, and that's a belief structure, physical literacy is crucial to the acquisition by all people from cradle to grave, and it's an essential skill to actively participate in this world. So you're asking, what is physical literacy? I don't have to do too much more, because if you accept that now, we're done. But I'll tell you a little bit. This is a slide about the next International Physical Literacy Conference. Will be in the Kingdom of Bahrain this September. The reason why that's relevant is we now will have 3 international physical literacy conferences around the world in the next 12 months. The first ever one was in 2010. So we've rapidly accelerated adoption of this term. The next major one will be in Winnipeg. The global conference will be in May 7th to 10th in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Why is this relevant to you? Is that the Canadian Museum of Human Rights, which is pictured in this image, is actually seen physical literacy and is now promoting it as an inalienable human right. And the United Nations, UNESCO, and the World Health Organization will join us in Winnipeg to proclaim that right at this conference. Finally, whoops, slow down. In Sweden next year, the first International Physical Literacy Conference will occur next year in September. I want you to feel that there's a global fire happening on physical literacy, and it's good to have Chatham-Kent on the leading edges of this. I just came back from Geneva at the World Health Organization meetings where the non-communicable diseases groups meet, and they have created the Global Action Plan for Physical Activity. I work with them directly, and I am now going to tell you very proudly that the #1 objective of the #1 strategic action illustrated in this slide is to develop physical literacy in a population to get a physically active culture. But a World Health Organization to make such a claim is a belief statement, but a very important one, because no other actions in the world have ever made a dent in the physical inactivity in this world. Also, the United Nations has a charter on the Convention of the Rights of the Child, and Article 31 of that convention is one that says a child's right to play. I will tell you very, very pleased that in Winnipeg, we'll have the Winnipeg Convention, which will be an amendment to Article 31 of the United Nations, illustrating that there should be a child's right to physical literacy, proclaiming that all communities should develop a society whereby we deliver physical literacy as a right of a child. In Canada, this is moving fast, in Canada, will the world leaders in physical literacy, you may not know that now, 36 million Canadians, maybe a few 100,000 know the term, a few more as of right now, but over 80 different agencies have adopted this term, some of which are listed here, from banks to organizations to the Canadian Parks and Rec, you name it. Oops, don't know why it's doing that. Canada is the only country with a consensus statement on physical literacy. You can download it on Google. It's 2 pages long. It's right there. I won't read it to you. June 2015. 2 weeks after this announcement, the Americans came out with their convention on physical literacy in the United States, and it was written by a Canadian, this document, the person in front of you. And the interesting thing here is that the American Surgeon General, now the former Surgeon General, we asked them to read those 2 documents, and what's relevant for you to see here is that the US Surgeon General said, no matter how many sidewalks we build, no matter how many parks we construct, no matter how we urge people to get involved in physical activity, they simply won't do it unless they have the competence to move or ability, the confidence to move, and a desire or motivation to move. Those 3 words embody physical literacy. It's not about eat well, exercise regularly, like Hal and Joanne have said to us for quite a number of years. It's about developing competence to move, confidence to move. It's growing and maintaining competency to move and confidence to move. It takes a community to raise a physically literate person and to maintain them for life. All of these sectors in this little diagram are essential, including the government and all community sectors, to develop the programs, peoples, and places necessary to create physically literate people for life. Skip on that one. This is the most important slide for you in this room to understand in terms of what is physical literacy. It's a cartoon, but it's a very accurate cartoon. What this diagram shows you which is very strongly evidenced in science, is that if you give people movement competence, the ability to move, like changing a light bulb while standing on a chair or chopping wood, those are movement competencies, then and you do it correctly, they'll develop confidence in that movement. If they're competent and confident, they'll actually do the things that they need to do, whether that's at work, at play, in vocation, or whatever setting you have. If you're then motivated to continue participating, you become active for life. That's a very positive feedback cycle. If you destroy confidence, you break the cycle. If you don't provide competence, you break the cycle. If you get rid of motivation, you break the cycle. You'll notice that there's two words in the middle that says when you're providing quality recreation, quality sport, quality physical education, it is essential that those programs provide fun and social connection. Because the number 1 and 2 reasons people stay in activity are fun and friendship. This is a very simple diagram, but it's broken in Canada, and is broken in a number of ways. So the simple thing for physical literacy is that we want to create not physical activity, but active participation in the masses, and we want that to be as safe as possible, but not overly safe. This is my city of Winnipeg, where I live, and many city people, if I saw that beautiful sidewalk, ice covered like that, would think about liability. But in the answer should be that you shouldn't see that as liable. That's actually, is that dangerous? No, it's a curling rink. Interesting enough, all of you looked at that and thought fearfully upon that diagram. I made this just yesterday to illustrate a point. And this will be a very important one about competency that I want you to make you feel. In Canada, there's 53,000 plus hip fractures a year. 16% of them occur on that surface right there. 16% of all those injuries. 20% of people my age and over, when they break their hip, die within 1 year. What's relevant here to this, if you were a curler and you went on that surface, curlers are great people because they actually teach people how to walk on ice at any age. So I'm going to show you some data here on this. On March 17th last year in my hometown, 109 people fell and broke their wrist or their hip at my hospital, the Health Sciences Center. On the next day, on March 18th, 130. That's over about 240 people. I tracked all 240 people. 41 of them passed away within this last month. 20% of them. I'm going to argue to you that walking on ice is competency and confidence. Winnipeggers stay indoors. If they are fearful of ice, they stay inside their house for 6 months and then get type 2 diabetes. So if you don't develop competent, confident movers, you suffer these consequences, which are personal tragedies. Fitness doesn't change the ability to walk on ice. Only walking on ice does. So I show you a magical thing of Canada. There are 800,000 curlers in Canada. 90% of all curlers in the world are in Canada. 70% of all curlers are over the age of 50, as illustrated in this diagram. The hip fracture rates of curlers is 1/1000th of that of the Canadian public. Curling saves lives. Now that may seem funny to you, but what does curling do? It actually creates competent, confident movers on ice. That's an amazing construct. Now, I'm trying to illustrate to you here that physical literacy is much bigger than what you think it is. If you shovel, in Winnipeg, we get lots of snowfall. Every major snowfall, we get 14 deaths from cardiac problems. 37 people come to the hospital, 14 people die the next day, and about 125 people get back injuries per snowfall. Those are all preventable by competent, confident moving. So I want you to feel this in a way that you don't before. I don't know why this is jumping. Canada has 5 measurement tools for physical literacy, the world none. And it's very exciting that we can measure physical literacy now. And some of that data I'm going to show you here. If you look at that list of activities on this screen, run a square, jump, hop, walk backwards, walk forwards. Those are basic land-based movement skills that all people should have independent of age. And to me, what's relevant here, that is in Manitoba and in Ontario, the outcomes of our phys ed curriculum is supposed to be to create health and physically literate children. That is your curriculum in this province right now. By grade 4, all children should have entry-level competency in all 18 of those movement skills. Here's the sad news. This is measured in your province. 15,733 children are measured across 452 divisions in this province. And when we measured all 18 of those movements, this is what happened. Boys were better at 14 of the movements and girls better than boys at 1. The bars moving right hand are when boys are better than girls. The other way is when girls are better than boys. Our curriculum states boys should have equal ability to girls in all of these movements. And yet in Ontario, in Canada, in Sweden, the United States, girls suffer from gender mistreatment, where we don't provide the same opportunities for girls to be active as boys. By not having these basic movement skills at a young age, the participation level of girls is dramatically reduced, as I showed you in that last diagram. If you don't have the building blocks of movement, the ABCs of movement, which is simply the movement skills that kids have, right after that, children lose confidence. This graph is also on 15,000 Ontario people, and after the age of 8, when girls lose competence relative to the boys, their confidence drops. 1 year after that, this is a terrible data. This actually made me cry as a scientist. This, I asked the basic question. Again, this is actually 41,000 people in Ontario. We asked the question, do you believe that being physically active makes you happy? 5-year-olds, both males and females, drunken little maniacs, they're happy to move. Age 6, they simmer down, thank goodness for the parents. At 7, 8, and 9, boys and girls are happy to move. At age 8, girls lose competence. At age 9, girls lose confidence. At age 10, 11, 12, 13, girls begin to associate unhappiness with physical activity. This is normative Canadian data. This is not a discussion. This is fact. This then explains the precipitous drop in physical activity in young women in this country. Young women die from heart attack and stroke 1 in 3 over the age of 50. 1 in 3. It starts at age 8. It's a culture we need to change. And as a result of this, young women pop their knees, ACL injuries, 6 times more frequently than males. When we apply a physical literacy approach to basketball and soccer in this nation, it actually takes the injury rate from 6 injuries from 6 to 1, 6 girls to every 1 boy, to 1.5 to 1. That's gender equity. So what I'm trying to illustrate to you is that physical literacy is a very different way of thinking. It talks about competence and confidence in moving. We've developed unbelievable programs that are now going to be rolled out across Canada for injury prevention. This I'll finish up on. This is measuring children who have high physical literacy on the left and lower physical literacy on the right. Their confidence and competence to move. If you look at the very bottom in red, I've highlighted the word self-esteem. It's not how fit you are, it's not your body composition, it's how well you move that determines your self-esteem. The people who had high physical literacy had 5.44 out of 6. All the reds, meaning kids with high physical literacy, had higher belief in themselves than the people who didn't. The next one I'll show you is related to your curriculum here, positive mental health. And we asked a very important question about the identity of children in this country related to resiliency. Everybody wants your child to be resilient, which is the ability to deal with adversity. We asked the question, does physical literacy, activity, BMI, your body composition, or fitness predict resilience? We used a very standardized tool made by a Canadian in Halifax called Dr. Michael Unger, the top resiliency researcher in the world. And this is the distribution, this graph, of resiliency. The kids on the right had high resiliency. The kids on the low had low resiliency. You can see where we made the boundary. We measured 192 kids in grade 5, and we tried to predict resiliency using fitness, body composition, physical activity, and physical literacy. Amazingly, but not unsurprising to me, we were able to predict with 80% accuracy resiliency in kids by physical literacy. Fitness, no relationship. Body composition, no relationship. physical activity level, no relationship. So you create confident, competent movers. You're also concurrently creating people who become resilient. So this is the final slide. If you create a physically literate culture, you create activity in your culture. That increases productivity in the workforce, decreases non-communicable diseases, many of them. It also reduces psychological injuries in people by increasing their self-esteem, self-efficacy, resilience. It also reduces physical injuries like fractures, ACL injuries, back injuries, and even drowning. In Sweden, all children must learn to swim, which is a competency. And in Sweden, the drowning rates are 1/6 that of Canada. That's a competency. So to me, I submit to you that physical literacy is a new way of thinking about things, and there's some great actions afoot here already in this community that are making physical literacy a highlight that all people in your community should endorse. It is vital for this council and all council members to understand that and hopefully support your wondrous community and all its sectors in helping all people of any age develop physical literacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kraylers. That is a tough act to follow. So what I'm going to do now is open it up for questions, and we will start with Councillor Caniff.
Thanks, Dean. That was certainly an eye-opening presentation. You think physical activity is good, but you don't realize just how much it impacts our life. From your experience, you've got a lot of it. What are some practical things we can do as a municipality? Like, you talk a lot about the stats and everything, but what are some things we can grab a hold of today and start pushing forward with this?
Yeah, I was excited to be a part of a meeting just moments ago where a Trillium Foundation grant is going to be submitted, putting your community together in all its different sectors to create more training of personnel in your community to help them help others become more physically literate, both at the younger youth sector and in the older adult sector. So I think people, places, and programs. People means more training. People also means the entire community needs to understand and value the word. Places, what does a physically literacy-enriched school, municipality actually look like? So next year in Winnipeg, we'll have 21st century spaces for 21st century lifestyles, conference where city planners, architects, and the like come together. So people, places, and programs, and the key sectors are the health sector, education, recreation, and sport coming together to work as a collective to improve the physical literacy across the lifespan. Great question.
Councillor Fluker.
Thank you. It's very, very interesting, and I totally agree with many of the things you say. However, being I hate to say this, a former phys ed teacher, many of the activities, and I think you just touched on it, that I was able to do with students is not allowed today. Just for some examples, the high jump, the pole vault, the discus, the shot put are not allowed because of, where's our lawyers, our legal implications and so on. And so this is very difficult because I can remember you had certain students that were just, that's what we want to thrive on. And I think of some of the activities, the fun activities that we would do on a day like this outside, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure you recall them. You would not be allowed to do them today. And I guess my point is in asking you is, are we pretty well relegated to walking and jogging?
I think you nailed it.
Fitness?
I think you've nailed it. Risk management is a very important thing, and we've had numerous, part of physical literacy is we've been able to bring people like the lawyers, the city planners, and many others together to have this risk issue. We've created a surplus of safety around our children when we need to bring it back down to proper safety. I can tell you that we've had great successes in communities in bringing appropriate risk back. The greatest risk of being on a playground is actually that you're going to enjoy yourself, not get injured. And so risk is not a negative construct. It is in most of your minds, but risk is both positive and negative. So I developed circus arts instruction programs inside of grade 5 schools in this country. Highly risky behavior, and it results in massive positive changes physically and psychologically and socially into well-being and matches the curricular elements. So unacceptable risk creation is what we call safety creep. And safety creep means that we have an irrational development of fear of risk. And you need to confront that as a municipality and as a council, and not permitting that erroneous application of liability as a strategy to limit activity. And we've had meetings to actually try to deal with that, and it is possible. Like when that cartwheel banning happened, I phoned the principal and stopped it the next day. And so we need to feel comfortable in how to confront inappropriate surplus safety, because it's harmful to children in the long term. Great question.
Councillor Van Dam, then Councillor Herman.
Dr. Krillers, great talk, meaningful for me. Just wondering what your thoughts are on youth with use of electronics, PS4s, things like that.
Yeah, gotcha. Like all those engineers created those wonderful things, the motor vehicle, the computer, and the internet. It's balance in society that I look for. I don't vilify. Those devices have saved many lives, 911 calls, you name it. If we didn't have that, our paramedic and fire services would not operate the way they do and successfully as they do. To me, it is about balance. We are the greatest spectator society on the face of the planet. We are, and we've created that by those devices. But I don't blame the devices. What does our community have that draws us away from those screens? And that becomes, and valuing the movement like we used to as free-range chickens that we were when we were growing up. So to me, it's creating a new community where we value movement as adults with children. I don't put away the device with my children. My children learned to be physically literate, and I helped them manage their trajectory through life so that there was an equal draw of enjoyment and friendship from movement with other people. So it is a value proposition, really. And so I think that can happen through everybody singing from the same book and having our school system, our recreation system, our early childhood educators, all creating that love of movement. And that will take a few years, and we might have to tweak it a bit. But in the end of the day, I completely understand your question. I don't vilify inanimate objects, though. I say it's more about creating an attitude and values in our future generation and ourselves again. We've lost it as well. Thank you, though.
Councillor Herman.
Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Kriller. It's an honor to have your expertise. I'm going to ask you a question. Something I work quite diligently with in our community is the older adult. Mm-hmm. So when I seen, I think it was 23% of age 60 and over. We are grateful and blessed to have 11 community senior centers and throughout Chatham-Kent. One mindset that I see as a challenge to get people to the dance, basically. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You know, what I hear is I'm not old enough to go to a senior center. Mm-hmm. However, those senior centers provide so many activities and programs that are very cost effective. And so that's the challenge that I see. Anyone that I know, quite a few that I know, not all, but quite a few, just to get that to that dance, to say, yeah, okay, wait a minute, I'm old enough, that's there for me, and that's provided to make me a longevity of I want to be here for another 20, 30, 40 years. So how do we get the mindset that's been established, and here we are at the 60s?
Yeah. There's a lot to that. I mean, I only had a short time to talk to you about the older adults. First off, the older adult is just as important as children in the physical literacy journey, first off. Having people understand the value of physical literacy we kind of knew it intrinsically when we were growing up. What we now have a term, though. To me, it's really guiding and creating opportunities for all forms of people at all age levels. So I want to provide a smorgasbord of options for older adults to enhance their mobility by design, not by chance. Mobility, I use that word because that's the means of social connection, not physical activity, that's exercise thinking. Mobility by design means I equip all older adults with an interest to move together and talk together. That is what makes people active in the first place. So to me, I think improving all of your facilities and having it known and broadcasting, that is going to be a first step. And that is, I believe, included in the grant application that they're trying to make to increase training and awareness at all ages in your community. So I think that is an important element, and I'd love to talk to you more about that in terms of projects that have been successful across Canada, because there have been some.
Councillor Thompson, and then Councillor Brock-McGregor.
Thank you very much. And Doctor, thank you so much for coming. I wanted to focus a little bit, the part of your presentation that really interested me was the risk component. And I'm going to come at this from a slightly different angle. I have two young kids myself, 8 and 10. And as you pointed out, when I was 8 years old, I was miles and miles from my home. Come home when the streetlights come on. And as much as I try to fight it, my kids aren't given the leash I'm given. And in my own heart, my own head, I say, well, you know, it's a busy road, or there's lots of traffic, or it's really fast. And out here in a rural community, we can't build sidewalks on every road. We can't make it as safe as perhaps some people would want. So from my perspective, my question, what would be your comment to a parent like me that worries about the risk?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, it's not to go back 40, 50 years. That isn't going to happen. What it's going to be is reimagining the future in terms of having just having children revalue play again is going to be a big issue. Actually getting them out of the highly risky, sedentary, watching the TV, playing on the video games thing, and getting them outside and valuing movement. I would argue that's the first step, so that parents actually do engage. A role model doesn't have to be fit. They have to be engaging with their children and moving with their children as opposed to watching them. Because we put our kids in structured activities a heck of a lot, and what we need to do is actually balance that with some free play and us be laughing, moving with them as well. And I think that will be the step that brings us back to our parks, brings us back to our trails, brings us back to some level of engagement with the outdoor world. It might still be semi-supervised, but I do believe that it is possible. I see far less of that. We have heavily structured environments where we are now. You also made me think that if you're a parent of a young girl, will turn into a woman later in life, it is essential that you protect that child from the culture that we've created, which inhibits physical activity in young women at very young ages. So you have to, because you'd like to think that all our sectors are servicing that, they are not. And we need to be aware of that and fix that so that we don't have gender inequity at that magnitude in our society. But reframing the concept of risk needs to happen at the both litigation, liability levels, as well as at the parental level, so they can feel free to let their kid climb on monkey bars and not go, I'm a bad parent for doing so. And that is a discussion. There is a framework out of Sunnybrook in this province by Brandy Tenenbaum at Sunnybrook about how to frame risk. There's some great Canadian researchers on that can frame risk in a really positive way to parents. If it becomes part of our school system, part of our recreation facilities, it becomes the normal, the new normal. So there's some pathways to step, but I truly appreciate your comment and understand it as a parent myself.
Thank you, and again, great presentation. I really like that term surplus safety, and I think it's something that we all innately sort of understand, and you know, we blame lawyers for taking the fun out of playgrounds, and that's probably warranted. And thinking about that concept and the work to change that, are there examples of other communities, other places that have been able to roll that back and are seeing success?
100%. So what, yeah, it is surplus, and even just the terminology is relatively new. it is surplus safety, not adequate safety. Surplus safety takes away decision-making, creates fear of judgment, fear of failure, all of these things which are tragic psychological outcomes. So we've convened numerous community discussions where we bring the lawyer, the one that sues you, the one that protects you, the city risk management person, and all the people in the room to have a conversation and talk about bona fide reasons to have risk managed, as opposed to hysterical reasons to have it managed. And those have gone really well. I'll give you some examples. A simple one that comes to my mind is we've now been in 3 communities in Canada, created a no withhold recess policy in schools, so that for administrative, academic, or punitive reasons, you cannot withhold reason because we value play above everything else. And therefore, if the policy isn't followed, then it has consequences to the administration of the school, and then they're accountable to that policy. That's a small example of bringing back risk and bringing back play in the appropriate measure. So yeah, and I think you have great community connectors here that are sitting in around here right now that are going to bring that to you over the next 3 years, given successful granting from Trillium. Great comment.
Okay, Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Dr. Redake. Dean, very good presentation, and I enjoyed it very much. I guess my question is, if we start educating kids in the primary class to be active, that'll carry on for the rest of their lives, I guess, or supposedly get them started on the right track. Do you feel that the school system, I know the parents have a responsibility, but I also think that the school boards also has a responsibility to participate in that responsibility as well. Do you feel that's happening? I'm not sure you know about our community, but across Canada, do you think that's happening?
Literacy has succeeded in Canada at a pretty high level, because if you take 200 school days and 9 professional development days a year, we've had 9 of those almost indefinitely on literacy, not on physical literacy. Schools are getting it. Your curriculum now includes the concept, but the delivery of physical literacy is nowhere close to the level that literacy levels have been achieved by grade 6. We're probably, I measured across the country, and I'm going to be harsh for a second, I'd argue that the lowest province in Canada meets their phys ed health curriculum at 3% success, 97% failure, and the highest one in the country is at 34%. So we're in the early years of rolling up our sleeves on the physical literacy delivery, and it is quality programming, quality teachers, not having your gym taken away for any reason other than no reason. You don't take pictures there anymore, etc., so that you value movement as much as you do numeracy and literacy. And that doesn't exist in any jurisdiction that I've seen, but I have seen it moving strongly towards that, such that even professional development days, it used to be 9 for literacy, and they'd have the phys ed teacher doing cross-curricular literacy in their movement. It should be reversed. So, but I'm happy with, in 2 provinces, they equal the distribution of professional development days towards literacy, numeracy, and physical literacy. So there are multiple steps I've seen, but it is in early years, and we need champions like yourself to talk to school boards, trustees, and others so they hear this message and then value it in their schools, because it's easy to put it aside. Thank you. Great question.
Okay, I know Mayor Hope has a question, but I'm wondering, Mayor Hope, if we can just see if there's any questions from the audience first. So if there's anyone in the audience that would like to ask a question, they're welcome to come up to the mic, Mayor Hope, and just put your question forward. Just let us know who you are. You turn it on, Brian.
Hello, Doctor.
Hello.
I'm Drew Simpson. I'm the independent candidate nominee for Chatham-Kent, Essex. I found that, especially too, based on the research that you've provided, that the hospital environment seems to have a missing component. Perhaps you would agree that the need for MRI machine or an fMRI machine might be within your request. As it happens, the income that your organization or your team is looking for is directed at council, or would it be directed at a provincial representative like the MPP Rick Nichols? I wasn't too sure of exactly how to fund something that you're looking for if there is no question of funds given the actual statistics. I know, especially too from my readings, there are two implications to having your type of research. One is the nature, and the one is nurture. You can have a landscape in which is very active and very regimented, or you can have a nature component that's based on the structure of the brain. I know especially too that as a neurologist or neuro physician, that there is an area in the brain, the thalamus, that if it's enlarged can cause gross abnormalities and weight gain. Is this something that your clinical practice is looking to kind of combat in determining as to whether or not the brain structure itself is the root cause of this of these individuals who are exerting obesity, or is this something that you're looking for the municipality to determine as to whether or not the security and safety of its environment is one that's more open and active for the ability for, say, young people like myself to feel open and free to, say, go for a run at 7 o'clock in the afternoon?
I think I got you on that. I think you're right. It's both nature and nurture. There's zero doubt about that. And the request for funding is not from this council here at all, from the city. There are numerous agencies across Canada that are really interested in funding these projects. There are evident. We took on literacy because we believed it was important as a society. I'd argue that we take on physical literacy on the same premise. My research is always helpful to make people move in the right direction, and certainly funding that research has been increasing in Canada to try to support the fact that indeed brains do change with the experiences that they're given and the opportunities that they have, and they are strongly implicated in downstream behaviors. Even if you are active when you're young doesn't mean you're active when you're older yet, because of all the negative things that happen in our society. But short answer is nature, nurture. It's going to be a balance. The request of funding is not to be here. It's with provincial agencies and above. And certainly research needs to go to validate some of our approaches here, but more in a follow-up pattern than a leading pattern. Thank you.
Okay, and I turn it to Mayor Hope.
Thank you very much, April. I used to have a wise phys ed teacher, okay, years ago, and I enjoy the information that you shared with us. I'd always pat himself on the back over there, but what's important, and I've taken the information that you've given to us, and I think one of the things that you mentioned is about it being fun. And have you ever been to a hockey rink lately?
Yeah.
Have you ever been to a soccer field recently? And I guess that's some of the things that I, as an older person, I mean, I have 11 grandchildren, so I get to see the one who didn't make it to the NHL standing in the crowd yelling at their child, or the soccer field or whatever. And I think we as a society need to understand that the game of sport and the recreational is that of recreational. It is an opportunity for us. The other part that kind of troubles me too, when you talk about phys ed being a part of a major curriculum, is also they call it nutrition breaks. And one of the things that's missing is, I remember when we went to school and we had recesses, we used to have a soccer game or a baseball game, and we played in those times because that's where we were playing with our friends that were doing that, and how many times we used to go to the Tilbury Park. But I guess my point is I really appreciate the information you shared with us. But I think there's a larger issue, as you talked about, When literacy was important, we started the BEST program in our workplaces so that people could learn how to read. I think the same emphasis has to be applied to this, that it's just not the council. I can provide all the recreational fields and everything else, but if we as a society don't rally behind it to make it a priority in our daily lives, I mean, I also think it's kind of neat they have those Fitbit now. You got one? I don't have one. But the thing is that people are using that in a competitive place. Mm-hmm. Oh, how many steps? Oh, I need another 1,000 steps. I'm going to go on the treadmill downstairs, or I need another. I think that is good because it gives them some measurable as to what their activity is for today. So I just want to, first of all, say thank you very much for the information you provided for us. And I'm glad our organization in the community itself, through the Communities Leaders Cabinet and others, are serious about this program. And that's why we had kicked off with Super Kids, where I was running around on bouncy toys and everything else. I think we're trying to do our best, but the element that I think no physical thing is going to, it's got to change inside the mind that, as Councillor Thompson talked about, you know, we won't even let our kids ride up and down the street in front of the house or in the sidewalks that are there. And I think we need to change our social side of things so so kids feel happier about participating. Just want to say thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you, Mary Hope. When Dr. Kraylars was talking about just getting out and having fun, all I kept thinking was you in a super cape, the mayor in a super cape, in the bouncy gyms and the bouncy castles, and that's what you mean. When we have our leaders getting out and playing with our youth, that speaks volumes in terms of us as a society. So thanks for that, and thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Councillor McGregor for some closing remarks.
Thank you, April. Thank you for the visual. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to close the Feature Act recognition and CK plan update. Thank you to Chris for highlighting our health status, and a big thanks to Dr. Kraylar for joining us tonight to share his expertise and inspire us to action, and thanks to April for being my co-host. The government of, as we take these learnings and ask what can be done, I encourage everyone to mark June 2nd in your calendar, as it is National Health and Fitness Day. The Government of Canada has proclaimed this day and is encouraging local governments, non-government organizations, and private sector, and all Canadians to recognize June 2nd as a day to celebrate and promote the importance and use of local health, recreational sports and fitness and facilities. This aligns with Canadian Environment Week, as walking and cycling are a great way to reduce vehicle pollution and improve physical fitness. Stay tuned for more details to follow, and thank you for your attention and participation. We'll now move into our regular council agenda. Thank you.
Karen, was there still some? Okay. I'm going to call the council meeting to order. I know there's a few papers that are still being picked up, but begin our council meeting, regular portion of our council meeting. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Is there a supplementary agenda this evening?
No, there is not.
I'm going to deal with disclosure of pecuniary interest, direct or indirect, or general nature thereof, the closed session items, of the items before, open session items before you tonight. Then seeing none. The next item on our agenda deals with deputations as of 3 o'clock, and I'll turn to the clerk.
None were received.
Our next item on the agenda deals with the consent agenda. Councillor Solomon so moves, seconded by Councillor Vakudaran. Any items of interest in the consent agenda? Then seeing none. Whoops, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. 10A1.
10A1, okay. Is there any others? Then seeing none, I have a motion to receive for information on the consent agenda. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and it's carried. Councillor Van Dam, you have 10A1 that we wish to, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Hope. A question around 10A1 is looking at the statistics of pothole repairs and the metric tonnage that we've purchased this year. How are we doing so far compared to past years?
Thank you, Mayor Hope. I'm going to have to get the data for the last few years. I don't have it readily at hand. However, I would say that every year it's pretty well the very similar thing is that we have a pothole season, and when we have freeze-thaw cycles and potholes arrive a lot, and usually what we do is each garage puts out one crew to go out and fix potholes. They get given a section. Yeah, okay. Sorry, there is some information in the report. So for 2017, we spent $511,000 on potholes, and for 2016, we spent $450,000 on potholes. And this year, as of April, we were at $250,000, which is about halfway, middle of April. So we're still fixing potholes, and we're going to go year-round. So it looks right now that we're not, we don't have more potholes to fix necessarily. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And just another quick side comment. You know, I received many complaints about, you know, maybe the methodology, and it may be concerning to the taxpayer as to what the exact methodology is to fill a pothole, and it may be concerning for the gentlemen that do it themselves. But is there a proper procedure that we have that our supervisors drill down to the guys and the crews throughout Chatham-Kent on how to, you know, do these or fix these potholes correctly?
Mayor Hope, yes, there is a procedure. It's fairly simple. Is that they take the debris out of the hole, and after that they put layers, and then they're supposed to compact the layers. And there's different ways to compact the layers. And then the supervisors, yeah. So we do train our staff and tell our staff how to do it right. So if somebody does see it and it doesn't look right, if they can report it to us, then we can follow up on it.
Thank you, and to that, there's no such thing as just putting loose fill in a hole and driving away. It must always be tamped down, correct?
That is our proper procedure, yeah. So, and then there's different ways to tamp it. You can drive over it, you can use a hand tamper, mechanical tamper.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Any further comments or questions from Councillor? Councillor Bondi, please.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. Miguel, could you explain to the public how they can call these things in? Because often they'll call councillors and we call you guys, and then you usually respond by saying, you know, you should just have that person call 360-1998, and then a file is created, et cetera. Because I don't think most people get that, right? And, you know, that could probably save everybody a step. So if you could just explain that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. Yes, the preferred system for us is that to raise what's called an active citizen request, and that could be two ways. One of them is 519-360-1998, or the other one is ckinfo@chathamkent.ca. Then a customer service representative will get the information, and then they can create a work order directly in the public works system, and it gets sent directly to the garage where is assigned to fix it. So this way you don't have to wait for somebody to read the email and talk about it. So that's the fastest method, and everything is tracked, and if after a certain amount of time the work order is not closed or there's not a follow-up, there's automatically a follow-up process that we can use to track if something's been forgotten.
Councillor McGregor, please.
Thank you, and through the mayor. I just had a couple questions when I was reading it, and thank you very much for bringing your report. I'm just going to ask you an example of the difference between a Class 1 and a Class 5 highway. Is that like the 402 down to like 40 or somewhere in between? Or
Yes, Mayor Hope, yes. So the Class 1 to Class 6 highway, it's in the Municipal Act and the regulation called the Minimum Maintenance Standards. It's based on volume of traffic and speed. So in Chatham-Kent, we don't have a 1. An example of a 2 would be Longwoods Road, Queens Line, Highway 2. Example of a 5 would be a little neighborhood road, so less traffic, a lot slower. And there's also a Class 6, but since they don't have an MMS, that would be maybe a gravel road with a very few cars in a day.
okay, and I was wondering actually if that, when it says Class A highway, it actually included some of our residential streets and such. And just one other question, just curious, the year-to-date pothole repairs. I was just curious the difference in estimated person hours to the amount of tons placed. Like for example, Ridgetown, 516 hours with only 8.32, where Wallaceburg is like 593 and at 21. And then if you jump down to Chatham, it was like 1,180 hours, estimated hours, with only 2705. So like what equates the difference between the man hours when filling potholes?
The procedure is the same in all garages, so it's pretty well down to the number of potholes that they have to fill. So as I explained in the report, the process is that we have patrols that go out and we're mandated to patrol the roads. The other one is complaints coming in. So I think it's strictly the amount of potholes, which is tied also to the condition of the roads. So if you have older roads, less well maintained, then you're more likely to get potholes.
Okay, yeah, and I understand that with the hours. I was just curious because to me the tons placed don't match up anywhere with the hours. So, and maybe they're not supposed to. So, I was just trying to understand why, why there'd be so many more man hours where there's less tons of fill going in.
Yeah, I guess the other one is that it is a human process with people. So, good thing you brought it up. I will certainly follow up on that. That's interesting, something interesting to look at.
Comments, questions? Councillor Solomon, please.
Thank you, Worship. Since I actually asked for this report, appreciate getting it. There is one question, though, that was put to me after, and that is, we know what potholes look like from the freeze-thaw cycle and hot patching going on and the tamping, et cetera, that you described. But somebody asked me the other day, what does the municipality do with respect to manhole covers that have dropped because of the freeze-thaw cycle that don't come back and then remain, with a gap, which are not classic potholes, but still have the same impact on rims and tires and et cetera.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. Yeah, that does happen. It's more complicated than fixing a pothole. So what usually happens is that if you can fill it and level it out, it works. But if it dropped to a point where either you have to move the actual manhole cover itself, then the way it works is there's rings.
Yep.
And then either you can take some rings off or add rings. And that's more complicated task.
So if I receive those complaints on Queen Street, which I have many, many times, do I direct them to you, or is it a construction company that does it? How does that?
No, if you could direct them to Public Works, some of them we can do. Keep in mind that the rings come in a certain size.
Yep.
So either sometimes it's 1 inch, sometimes it's 2 inch. So if it's something in between, then you can't. It's not really worthwhile changing the height of the.
I'll tell you about Queen Street right now and save me calling in later. Did you? Hello. Yeah, I'll tell you about Queen Street right now while I got
But
you
the
instead of
reporting
calling
process is the same. It's 360-1998.
Or council meeting where I just tell you that it's Queen Street that you ought to take a look at because I've got complaints on a daily basis.
Okay, yeah, so I'll make, Mayor Hope, I'll make sure that our supervisor who patrols those roads pays attention next time and more attention, and then we'll report back. And if it's a bigger project that requires engineering, then we put it on our list. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Any further comments or questions? Just want to thank you for the information, and Councillor Solomon, you're right, is to see how much we're actually spending in pothole repairs, definition and all that. I think the important thing is that when we see climate change occurring and we're getting, the winters are becoming more, it's have a feeling from spending, like the 1 year we spent $500,000 fixing potholes to, a budget. We may see that budget have to go up in order to accommodate, because I think the important part is for people to call 360-1998, because I agree with you, work orders are important. If you want to get quicker action, if you send me an email, it might be a little longer to get a reply to the email or for me to forward that email. If people are just calling it in and giving the information, it's a much quicker process that staff can get it in the system right away and make sure it's taken care of. So I do want to thank you, and it's, we are fixing potholes, $500,000 worth of potholes, but we know how severe some of the weather can be. Before you go, Miguel, I know that tonight will be your last council meeting that you'll be in, and I just wanted to say personally on behalf of council and myself, we wish you well in your new endeavors and much success, and it's been a pleasure and an opportunity for your expertise to be brought into the community so that we can make our community better in what we do around infrastructure and engineering. So on behalf of council, I just wanted to say and wish you well in your new endeavors, but most importantly is to thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. No further questions on it. Councillor Van Dam, motion to receive for information, please.
Do so move.
It's so moved, seconded by Councillor Oche. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and it's carried. Next item on the agenda deals with notice of motions. Councillor Solomon, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I, Councillor Solomon, hereby provide notice that I will bring forward the following motion at the May 14th, 2016 council meeting for discussion and voting. In light of the impending legalization of marijuana, I move that the staff prepare a report on its plan to handle the coming legalization of marijuana on such topics as enforcement on public consumption and impaired driving, number 2, public health and education, 3, business licensing, 4, odor mediation and control, both between neighbors and in our social housing, land use planning with respect to sales, production, and consumption, employer-employee relations here within the municipality, with respect to codes of conduct issues, medical use while at work issues, etc., and recreation, number 7, recreational areas to be smoke-free, and any other areas that staff may believe are appropriate to come up with a plan in advance of the legalization.
Any further notice of motions? Then seeing none, our next item on the agenda deals with Community and Development Department. So let's deal with the first item.
Item 12A, appointment bylaws.
Councilor Fluker, please.
Pleased to move all of the recommendations, Your Worship. I'm not going to read them. We had a chance to read them.
Second to that is Councilor Caniff. Any comments or questions? And seeing none, I'd ask Council now to consider the recommendation brought before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 14-0.
Next item on the agenda deals with infrastructure and engineering services. Let's deal with the first item.
Item 13A, 2018 cemetery life cycle projects.
Councilor Carmen McGregor, please.
I'd be pleased to move the recommendations.
It's been moved by Councilor Carmen McGregor, seconded by Councilor Pincinel. Any comments or questions? Councilor Pincinel, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to probably Jeff, I guess.
No.
Oh, sorry. I guess the only question I have is the Sherman Cemetery. They're building that bridge right in front of it. That's going to be difficult to get in. Are you going to push that one off until the fall? Or it may even end up being next spring, just because of all the construction that's already going on there?
Thank you, Mayor Hope. We'll certainly try to plan that around the construction work that's happening there, because we don't want to get in their way and we don't want them getting in our way. So,
and there's probably going to be a few little landscaping things that'll have to be done as well.
I would think so, and that will be done in cooperation with the area supervisor who looks after the park, which is just outside of the cemetery gates there as well.
Awesome, thank you.
Further comments? Councilor Bondi, please.
Great, thanks, Mayor Hope. Just one quick question. I was always kind of confused as to when those gates were open, like the front through off Park. You could, obviously there's no gates, you can drive in whenever you want, but is there any schedule to when those other gates are opened? Are they, because sometimes I would see they would be closed on Sundays and you think, well, that's when they would, but maybe they didn't open because they were in awfully bad shape. So this is a nice improvement, but is there any schedules to those that you're, obviously I'm trying not to put you on the spot.
Historically, the gates at Maple Leaf Cemetery were opened and closed at dusk and sunrise by the caretaker who actually lived on site for many, many decades. And that's more or less a part of our past now, because we don't have anybody on site after 3 p.m. And so it's just not feasible to open and close the gates. So they have been permanently open for a number of years now. So with our new project that we're hoping to begin with this year, the new piers on the old section that did have gates will just be an open pier. And we also feel that that's a safety issue, that if they're closed, then perhaps at night when there's no lighting in the cemetery and somebody does happen to get in there and needs a safe exit out, we don't want them finding a point of entry that is inaccessible.
Any further comments? Councilor Carmen McGregor, please.
Thank you. Through the mayor to Colin. This might not be the right place to ask this, but you can probably send me information if you have it. I drive by daily the work that's going on in the mausoleum in the Riverview Cemetery project in Wellsburg. I was just curious if everything's on schedule and moving as designed. It looks like they're there and they've been there quite a while. I wasn't sure how long it was going to go on.
Yeah, we're very pleased with the progress that the contractor is making on the building. Most of the exterior work has been completed. There's just some outside finishing work to be done, and then they're going to move focus to the inside to finish some cleaning and some ceiling work. And hopefully by early summer, we should be just about tied up and finishing up some landscaping to make the overall appearance more presentable.
Excellent, thank you.
Further comments or questions? And seeing none, I ask council now to consider the recommendation now brought before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 14-0.
Our next item on the agenda deals with finance, budget, and information technology. Let's deal with the first item.
Item 14A, tax policy 2018.
Councilor Bondi, please.
I'd be happy to move all of the recommendations 1 through 6, Mayor Hope.
It's been moved by Councilor Bondi, seconded by Councilor Brock McGregor. Any comments or questions from council? Councilor Van Dam, please.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. My question with this revolves around If we lower the industrial rate, in doing that, how do we compare with our neighboring municipalities?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you look at Table 3, it gives a comparison with 5 other municipalities for the industrial rate. We are roughly in the middle. You have some, so we're at 2.16. You're as low as 1.95 in London and up to 2.32 in Windsor. And that's on page 5 of the report, Table 3.
Must have missed that, but I guess my concern there is if we lower the industrial, what impact will that have on all the other classes? They'll inherently be raised as well. I think it's 0.5% is what it would work out to residential. But more importantly, has there been a net benefit each time we do that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the change to the industrial ratio adds about $2.56 to the average residential household, which is offset by the reduction in the education. As relates to the benefit from lowering the industrial ratio, I think ECDEV is probably the best to speak to that. However, in recent conversations with Stuart McFadden, he has mentioned that the number of industrial properties is, there's not many that are vacant at this point, and supply is becoming an issue.
So that's a great comment, and through you, Mayor Hope, we did have a decent discussion at noon hour about this, and you know, it's good that some of our older industrial properties are filling up, but at the end of the day, that type of assessment is not the same as the assessment we could gain from a brand new build. So, you know, I get the proactive measures that we're attempting to make here, but it's not new news, or it's not mind-breaking news. And I know economic development isn't here to sort of, you know, answer the question on what we can do better. I just want to know if it works.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So there is some new activity. For example, within the last couple months, there was a new a purchase approved at the Bloomfield Business Park, which I believe construction has started. So there is some new activity, but up until now, it primarily has been about reusing the buildings that are currently there. So it's been more about jobs than it has been about increased taxes.
Just for Councillor Van Dam, I know Don wants to chime in because of the economic development, and I have a few comments. So, Don, you want to jump in?
Thank you, Your Worship. In answer to Councillor Van Dam's question, we have a fairly high need right now for new industrial properties, and we've been trying to work with a number of developers to see whether they're prepared to build them on spec or to work with us to have some sort of an incentive program. If there's anybody listening in the audience that's in any way interested, we get a great deal of business coming to Chatham-Kent, and over the last 5 or 6 years, as we've been more successful in filling those older industrial properties, there's been an increased demand for new industrial builds. So we're looking to try and have that sort of collaborative discussion. We do have a number of business parks where we have space still available, and I'm happy, you know, we've reported in council chambers that we've had a number of new builds committed to. There's a activity going on right now in Bloomfield Business Park. We have another commitment in the Blenheim Business Park, but there's no question that we're looking for increased collaboration of people to come in, build industrial properties, and we believe that there's lots of opportunities for uptake in that regard.
Just on that, Councillor Oche, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Steve. Steve, do you know, I know Leamington's not on here, but do you know what their industrial rate is at? Or their commercial, either?
So the comparators that we use were part of the BMA study, and I don't believe they participated in the BMA study, so I don't have readily available, although I can try to find that for you.
If you could, I just saw something, I actually sent it to you, to Don the other day, where they seem to be extremely busy, and then I had a gentleman call me that's in the construction, and he's just raving how busy Leamington is, and then mentioned that they have a very low fee, actually no fee. So
not on the, no, obviously not on taxes, but on the build. So, I talked to Don, and apparently, and we're in the same range, as them, and so they were asking why, what the difference is. So I don't know if there's something that we're charging that I don't know about, or they're not charging that we are charging, so I do think this will help greatly.
Steve, I'd actually jump in there. So Leamington went on the news about how they don't have development charges on the residential, but they do take it on their industrial and the greenhouse industry, so they make it up there. So they still charge $300, and we charge 32, 37, I think it was $3,700 or something like that. And I did the comparable analysis about what we're charging for our residential development and connections. So we do have that information, and I'm more than welcome to share it, because it was one of the same questions I asked, is if I got questioned, what are we doing comparable to Leamington? So we do have that information, so we can provide it. But that's only on residential, that's not on the industrial side of it. Yeah.
That'd be great. If we do have Leamington on industrial, I'd like that too, because the gentleman in the construction seems to think they're just booming, and wondering why we're not getting the same. So I'd like to compare that industrial as well, if we could.
In industrial, we don't charge anything.
Right, I know, that's right, and that's why I can't figure out why he thinks they're booming compared to what we are, but I'd like to know.
Okay, Don?
Thank you.
Thank you. There are many industrial rates for Leamington, so it's not like I can give you one amount, but I will distribute to council a copy of their 2017 industrial rates for Leamington. They haven't set their 2018 yet.
But just on to comment back to Councillor Van Dam, one of the problems that we're faced with is some of the investments are looking at being in a building within 3 months, 90 days, 4 months. They don't want to wait. Right now, we're in a situation where we don't have the vacancies that we used to have. So we have one building in Wallsburg, but it happens to be that the land is contaminated and nobody will touch it. And so the building just sits there. We have one building on Sass Road, or Colburn Street, that's empty, waiting for an occupant. We have one on Richmond Street that's been sold. We're waiting to find out who will be occupying it. Tilbury will do an exchange between Blenheim and Tilbury with Woodbridge Foam, which will leave us one facility left in Blenheim open. So we are looking at innovative ways, which we will probably be coming back to council with, innovative ways that we can create a surplus or a stock of some industrial 50,000 square feet, 40,000 square foot factories that can be up and running in a quick period of time for these potential opportunities that exist with factories. Because when you build a factory, you're usually looking at 9 to 10 months of construction period. And some of these companies are looking now. And if you drive along the 401, you know exactly what I mean, is that they have a lot of it for lease and for sales along the, Kitchener, Waterloo, Milton area. And we are in the same boat as Windsor. Windsor doesn't have a stock supply neither that's sitting there ready. So we got to look at an innovative way as how do we support and getting some stock into our marketplace so that potential opportunities for employment can come. Councillor Herman, please.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. I have a couple questions through to you, Steve. First of all, I'm thinking back, when was the last time that we did decrease the tax ratio for industrial? Do you recall? Sorry, just put you on the spot there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the last time that the industrial tax ratio was decreased was in 2016.
And how much did we decrease it then? Do you recall?
Just while Steve is looking for that, we also decreased in the industrial taxation where any facility that was over 100,000 square feet, we actually reduced that. I think that was about 2007, 8, 9, somewhere around in there. We had reduced it once already, but I'll let Steve answer the other part.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So there's several years of history as it relates to the ratio. So in 2009, council lowered the industrial transition ratio from 2.927 down to 2.4350, and then it's almost every year since it's been decreasing. So basically, it went from a high in 2009 of 2.927.
So then, my question, obviously, over the years, Council of the Day determined it was important to review that and to decrease that. Obviously, 2009, this is the third time it's come back then. I think that's what I heard you say. Correct, Steve?
I actually think it's been more than 3 times. It's been a number of years since 2009 where that's happened.
Okay.
And I believe, I know at least in 2016 and in 2018 as proposed, what we've done is really the education change is sort of what we've used as the significant portion to be able to use that change and the savings generated from that to lower the industrial ratio to try to avoid any burden shift.
Okay, so then knowing that, I see discussions with commercial quite a bit, being on the Business Improvement Association, and I know that we haven't done any changes to that commercial sector. I know there's a little bit of change this time with assessments to their advantage, fortunately. And I know that the commercial sector is such a growing part of our community. And we've gone through so many changes from industrial, I'm not going to say versus commercial, but there seems to be such a shift to commercial. And I'm just asking, I suppose, why we aren't focusing on that sector. I mean, since we've done this so many times with industrial, why haven't we focused? And again, it would have been advantageous, I'm sure, to have economic development here as well with you, but obviously they're not. But Donald, you, Mr. Shropshire, you are here so that you can answer, but I'm torn that we're not looking at the commercial sector a lot more, and maybe you can address that.
So the commercial ratio is 1.9504 versus the industrial of 2.161. So it's administration's recommendation to continue to lower the industrial ratio until it equals commercial, and then potentially in the future lowering them in lockstep so that commercial and industrial are the same ratio.
Okay, so that's the goal. The plan is in the near future to have that as a balance.
Well, subject to council approval, it would be administration's recommendation. However, it really does depend on what we've done has been using the education savings, so it really depends on the education rate every year and the reduction that we see from that in order to be able to offset the ratios. So depending on the size of the education reduction, that's what we use. So it could be a couple years, it could be a little bit longer horizon.
So there's no guarantee on when that could happen. It's just something we're looking at when it does. Again, I don't know, Mr. Shropshire, economic development-wise, if you have anything that you can offer to the commercial sector not being weighted at this time or looked at opposed to the industrial part of that.
I think Mr. Brown's addressed it for the most part. The sweet spot that we've been trying to get to is to have our assessment growth rise higher than the rate of inflation so that you can actually limit the tax impact on our citizens. So over the last couple of years, in 2017, it was the best we've done in some time. It's an indication the economy is improving, but the reality is when we have a tax rate change, it's revenue neutral for the municipality. If we lower a rate and we still have the same budget, if you lower one, then the others all go up. So there's always a give and take with those tax decisions. So we're very careful, and there's a lot of consideration goes into making the recommendations. We are also very considerate of, what the impact is going to be on attracting new employment and maintaining our existing employers. So that's the type of balancing act that Steve and his team have gone through when they're making the recommendations. We recognize that our commercial tax rate have been traditionally higher than our surrounding competitors, and our industrial have been traditionally a little bit lower. We're trying to lower them all, but we're doing that in an environment where we're trying to increase our overall assessment growth. It's not there's not a perfect solution on that one, but we can certainly take council's direction in terms of where you'd like us to take our future studies.
So when you come back and talk commercial, can you help me understand that, or a little bit clearer? Maybe that's what I need, is maybe we can talk to our business improvement associations and see what it is that they're seeing, the pain they're feeling, and if it's something we should look at a little deeper.
We can do that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? And seeing none, I would ask council now to consider the recommendation now brought before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 14-0.
Next item on the agenda, please.
Item 14B, External Auditor, RFP 2018 to 2022.
Councillor Foss, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommendation.
Seconded by Councillor Brock McGregor. Any comments or questions? And seeing none, I would ask council now to consider the recommendation now brought before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 14-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
Item 14C, offer to purchase 15416 Austin Line, Orford.
Councillor Van Dam, please.
Pleased to move the recommendations, Mayor Hope.
Seconded by Councillor Pinsino. Any comments or questions? And seeing none, I would ask council now to consider the recommendation now before you. And I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 14-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
14D, road name change policy.
Councillor Fluker, please.
Pleased to move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Seconded, Councillor Brock McGregor. Comments, questions? And seeing none, I would ask you now to consider the recommendation. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 13-1.
Next item on the agenda. A closed session report. Councillor Carmen McGregor, please.
Thank you, and through the mayor, I'm pleased to move the closed session report of Monday, May 7th. Not present were Councillors Leclerc, B. McGregor, Myers, Robertson, and Wesley. Council directed administration on advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose with regard to Union Gas merger with Enbridge, Section 2392F of the Municipal Act.
Before, I just wanted to make a comment, and I'm going to look at legal services and the clerk, because I did receive notification. I think Councillor Brock McGregor was not a part of the closed session because of a conflict of interest.
It's my understanding that they have to check in for attendance first before and then step out of the room.
That's, I think everybody should.
Not to attend, so.
Yeah, well, okay, as long as everybody knows, because I know there was only one item, and they said their participation would be limited because of potential conflict of interest. Okay, no problem. It's been moved by Councillor Carmen McGregor, seconded by Councillor Foss. Ask council now to consider the recommendation before you. Now I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 13-0.
I'll deal with the next item on the agenda, approval of communicated items. So moved by Councillor Solomon, seconded by Councillor Foss. Any items of interest? Councillor Oche, followed by Councillor Van Dam, please.
2I, please.
Go ahead. No,
thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. Does this mean that the, reading through it, does this mean the schools are back up on the block, or is this just waiting until the election is over for the provincial government? Sorry, that's the 2I is the Ministry of Education Pupil Accommodation Review Guideline.
Yeah, so everything's, come Wednesday, is going to be up in the air, so.
Okay, so it's not something to get overly worried about right
It's
at the moment.
not something to be over worried about till the 7th of June when government reconvenes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? Yeah. Councillor Van Dam, please.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. I just wanted to bring to your attention, as well as that of Council, item 2F, where it makes mention of the Canada Infrastructure Program and the $10 billion that will be allocated in provincial funding. The reason why I bring this up is, you know, I have great concern, and I know you do too, because you've talked about a Twin Pad Arena. This particular fund may give us the runway to apply for that. So I kindly ask that we keep our thumb on this, this grant when it opens up after the Ontario election, and also to look at tangible ways where we here in Chatham-Kent can also improve our public transit. If you take my ward, for example, public transit is only available in the most southeasterly part, being Ridgetown. It'd be great if we could look at other communities like Bothwell and other communities in the west, the north and the south as well, to really give people more avenue to travel throughout. I see this as a great fund partnership between the province and the government, and hopefully our staff can keep on top of it and give us correct guidance of what program or what projects I think that we hold so near and dear to us here.
I think every time I get something, I fire it over to Mike, and so we are keeping an eye on everything that's going on. But as you know, with an election, everything become a standstill until such time the election's done. Councillor Thompson, please.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to bring everybody's attention to 2D. That's the letter from the Minister McGarry in regards to the barriers on the 401 of special interest, of course, to West Kent, South Kent, and East Kent, as well as everybody who drives it. I just wanted, I can't remember, truth be told, have we taken an official stance that cables aren't good enough? I mean, that's my personal stance.
No.
No? Would now be a proper time to bring something like that in non-agenda business, that we could make that an official council position? Or would you like to see that as a notice of motion?
Like to see it as a notice of motion, but I think we would probably be best to wait to see after the June election. What you do right now will fall into the black hole until such time. I think waiting might be the most appropriate for us.
All right. Again, I just wanted to make mention that this should be on everybody's minds. This is a serious safety issue through our community. And yeah, after the June election, I'll probably be bringing something forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further? Then seeing none, motion to receive, no. Yeah. I did have, okay. I'd ask all those in favor of receiving for information. Opposed, if any, and is carried. Non-agenda business items. Councillor Herman, please.
I have a question for Mr. Thomas. And this is with regards to just confirming the date for the closure of Charing Cross Road overpass. Not over, it's, I think June, I'm not sure, for 3 months that we're going to have that. Is there a plan in place similar to the 40 highway closure and detour routes? And I haven't seen a lot of communication. I'm not sure if what's been out there. If we're doing if Chatham-Kent's going to do any social media blitz on that. I mean, we had a great blitz through economic development. I mean, that was a detourist route on 401, but that was with off-ramps. But this, in this case, is our main objective of our travelers, specifically anyone that goes to work and shops, and if they go to Blenheim or if they're going to Chatham from Erio, Blenheim, that's a popular route. So I think of the Bloomfield and a lot of wear and tear was on that, I believe, over the winter with regards to our truck traffic being detoured from that 40 highway overpass closure. So maybe you can just update council as to the when and the hows what our plan is as CK. And I know it's an MTO plan, but what do we have to do as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. So you're correct, it is an MTO project. So our involvement has been working with them on the detour routes. We also work with them to confirm that the condition of our roads will be returned to their previous state before the construction started. Construction is slated to start in June, but again, that's controlled by the MTO and supposed to be about 3 months' time.
3 months, yes. And so I mean, the Bloomfield Road, I don't know if that's, has any infrastructure to be addressed from the winter before this project starts. I suppose that'll be addressed before.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. I'm not aware of any construction planned for Bloomfield.
Okay. So the date, again, could maybe an email through to us, and maybe there will be a social media, you have a new social media site as well. Would you be able to put that on there?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Hope. That's a good suggestion. I could put the link to the MTO,
Okay.
Which I'll encourage them to keep their website updated as well.
Absolutely. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any other non-agenda business items? Councillor Oche, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Thomas. Thomas, I got a call the other day regarding our Bloomfield industrial site, and I was told that if we were to get another business or industrial company on there, we have to build a new road coming out because of the MTO with the 401. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mayor Hope. So we're reaching our capacity on that particular site, and in order to go to the next level, we're working very closely with the MTO right now. The first thing we're doing is called the traffic impact study. From that's going to drive our cost sharing proposal. We will be meeting with the MTO again in June to discuss the details of that, but that's exactly the things that we're discussing about what to share, which would include an entire new configuration with different traffic lights as well. So it's all based on the level of activity. As the level of activity increases in the business park, we have to make infrastructure changes around that to ensure that the traffic can flow properly.
Okay. So when was that meeting? Sorry, I apologize.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. We've already met with them 2 times on this just this year, and we will meet again in June to look at the traffic impact study that they're conducting right now. And from that, we will enter in a cost-sharing agreement. It will be up to this council, the next council, to determine when we go forward with that next level of investment. The concern is that the MTO timeline may be different from ours. So we'll have that discussion and negotiations.
So just say we had somebody come in and say we want to start building right away. Are we going to need it for that company, or do you know, or do we have some time here that we can actually wait on this?
Thank you. We don't have a lot of time, I would say, and that's why we're actively working on it right now. It is our goal to be ready to go so that when those businesses come in and they wish to invest, that we have a very solid plan in place and it meets their requirements.
Okay. Now, I'm not sure who this question would be to, but I believe one of the trucking firms that are out there, obviously it's not an industrial firm, but they were supposed to, if I'm not mistaken, make a place where everybody could dock and take out whatever supplies are there. And I don't believe that ever happened. Is that ever going to happen? I don't know.
I've been here for 12 years and I've never heard that one.
So, okay, then how did the 2 trucking firms get there if they're not industrial firms? Did we change zoning, I guess?
It's a permissible use on the property.
So it doesn't have to be industrial. We can, like if another firm come in.
I wasn't sitting on council when that decision was made to make the trucking company have space. We did sell them extra land there So it must be in compliance because they're there. I think the thing that we're trying to do is focus on the amount of traffic, whether it's that, and as Thomas indicated, we've been meeting with MTO staff because at any pressure point, let's say for instance, we get a company that wants to locate there, and if we don't have our homework done, we could prolong the construction of that facility for a while. So we need to make sure that we have the infrastructure so that traffic impact studies are not going to delay the process. And we just went through that with the new factory that is being built out there, is that we had to make sure and work with MTO to make sure we got the information as quickly as possible so that construction can begin.
Right. No, this is a different subject, and I apologize. I've got a phone call, and I didn't like what they were told. They were told that one reason they can't be there is because it's going to need a new road. The second one was because it wasn't an industrial business. So I have spoke to someone in Chatham-Kent, and they've got a hold of them and is now working with them. But I must say the first thing that they were told was not very good. So that's why I'm asking about this. Are we allowed to put other businesses there that are not industrial?
As long as the only business you're allowed to put there are those that are conform with the permissible use on the property. If they're not part of it, because I mean, I haven't heard anybody tell any industry. I mean, I'm begging people to buy land out there, but
right, well,
we've not. They got to make sure they're in compliance and conform to what the permissible uses are on the property.
Okay. Oh, well, I can speak to you after.
Yeah, if you don't mind. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any further non-agenda business items? Councillor Carmen McGregor, please.
Just like to mention that we had, I don't know if it's our first ever or our first in a very long time, but a very successful home show in Willisburg this weekend. And so kudos out to the local radio station who I think headed up most of the work and the organizing of that event, because it really changed our curling club around. You walk in there, you'd have never guessed it was a curling club. It looked really good. So I was really impressed. So kudos to those who put that together on the weekend.
Good. Any further non-agenda business items? And seeing none, I'm going to move the reading of bylaws. First and second readings. So moved by Councillor Solomon, seconded by Councillor Vacoudrin. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and it's carried. Shall council go into committee? Third and final reading. So moved by Councillor Brock-McGregor, seconded by Councillor Oche. Any comments or questions? All those in favor? All those opposed, and it's carried. Next item on the agenda deals with resolution of council. Councillor Carmen McGregor, please.
Thank you, and through the mayor, I would move that Chatham-Kent Council adjourn to its next meeting to be held on Monday, May 14th, 2018, and that Chatham-Kent Council authorize itself to meet in closed session on that day to discuss any matters permitted by the Municipal Act.
It's been moved by Councillor Carmen McGregor, seconded by Councillor Brock McGregor. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and it's carried. And good night.